After dedicating 15 years to building my father's plumbing business from a single van into a thriving fleet, I watched him hand the brand new company truck, meant for my work, to my lazy younger brother as an engagement gift. That was the moment I realized I'd never be valued, no matter how much I sacrificed. "That brand new company vehicle is yours," my father beamed, presenting it to my brother as an engagement gift. 3 months later, I submitted my notice. Soon after, they were truly struggling. After 15 years dedicated to cultivating my father's plumbing business into a prosperous enterprise, I witnessed him hand the keys, specifically for my work truck, to my younger brother as an engagement token. That was the precise moment I comprehended I would never truly be appreciated, regardless of my contributions. My name is Alex, 35 years old, and until recently, I functioned as the essential foundation of Wilson Family Plumbing. While most of my peers pursued higher education, I remained to assist my father in expanding our venture. I mastered every facet of the trade, from clearing persistent blockages and mending failing pipelines to implementing intricate setups and pacifying infuriated clients during 2 a.m. winter callouts. I essentially embodied the company as my father, Earl, progressively transitioned into a supervisory capacity. Dad initially launched with merely a single van and a basic toolkit from our garage. Today, we boast, or rather, they operate, a fleet of 8 vehicles and a staff of 12. This expansion wasn't due to some stroke of fortune or miraculous intervention. It was the product of countless hours of my arduous labor, forfeited weekends, and unwavering dedication to forging our community's standing. Each glowing testimonial, every returning patron, every new referral was a direct result of my personal commitment to their contentment. My younger brother, Travis, became part of the team 5 years prior, at the age of 28. He frequently behaves like a reluctant adolescent forced into the family enterprise. Punctuality is a constant struggle. He often extends his lunch breaks and routinely leaves projects incomplete. The sheer volume of customer grievances I've had to rectify following his appointments is truly remarkable. While I remained available around the clock for urgent situations, Travis would routinely misplace his phone on weekends. Invariably, Dad always had a convenient justification at hand. He's still familiarizing himself, or not everyone possesses your innate capability, Alex. The indications were consistently present. Whenever I trained fresh recruits, they frequently bypassed me in promotions. When I introduced a novel scheduling framework that boosted our operational effectiveness by 30%, Travis received the commendation at our company assembly merely for supporting the initiative. My proposals to venture into commercial agreements were deemed too hazardous by Dad, only for him to laud Travis's pioneering vision when he advanced an identical concept half a year later. The glaring financial inequities eventually became undeniable. For years, Dad had held out the prospect of partnership, hinting at ownership shares that never materialized. Concurrently, I uncovered that Travis was earning an additional $15,000 per year, despite bearing fewer obligations and possessing less tenure. I was still operating a 2010 pickup, showing 180,000 miles on the odometer, while both Dad and Travis navigated around in vehicles that were under 3 years old. I consistently reassured myself that fidelity held significance, that family deserved precedence, and that Dad would, in due course, acknowledge my efforts. I was mistaken on every single point. My own truck had been experiencing frequent malfunctions for several months. The transmission often slipped, the suspension was severely compromised, and the storage compartment had developed corrosion perforations, allowing water ingress during downpours and imperiling costly apparatus. Following a particularly severe mechanical failure that resulted in the loss of a significant client, Dad at last conceded that a replacement vehicle was essential. That evening, as I surveyed the deterioration of my aging truck, Dad joined me in the garage, holding 2 bottles of beer. He offered one to me and rested against the workbench. For a brief span, it felt reminiscent of earlier times, before Travis entered the business, when my father and I would collectively address operational challenges. "Do you recall when I showed you how to replace the belt on that old Ford?" he inquired, a rare, gentle expression softening his worn features. "You must have been no older than 12. I nodded, the recollection flooding back. "You permitted me to complete the entire task while you observed, remarking that I possessed the most stable hands you'd ever witnessed on a youngster. You declared you'd never seen anyone embrace plumbing with such aptitude, Alex, a genuine gift." He took a prolonged drink from his beer, his gaze fixed on the vehicle instead of me. "This enterprise, it wouldn't be what it is today without you." In that fleeting instant, I felt esteemed, a closeness with him that had become increasingly scarce. He patted my shoulder before returning indoors, leaving me to ponder why these instances of affirmation had grown so infrequent. Why was he unable to validate my worth when it truly counted, in strategic choices, in remuneration, or in the presence of Travis? I devoted several weeks to exploring various options, carefully balancing fuel economy against storage volume, locating optimal deals, and completing all necessary acquisition documents. I even secured funding through our established banking institution. This truck was destined to function as my primary workstation for the coming 10 years, so my objective was to choose wisely. That particular Sunday, Dad invited our entire family for dinner. Travis arrived with his fiancée, Jessica, newly betrothed after only 8 months of courtship. Mom had prepared an elaborate meal, and Dad appeared remarkably jovial. After dessert, he rose and requested everyone's attention. My spirit soared, anticipating an overdue acknowledgement of my diligence, or perhaps the long-promised partnership. Instead, he produced a set of keys affixed to a silver fob bearing the company emblem. With the broadest smile I had witnessed in years, he passed them to Travis. "To assist you in beginning your new chapter, son," he announced. "The new company vehicle is yours. I arranged for all the modifications you desired. Regard it as an engagement gift from your mother and me." The ensuing quiet stretched into what felt like an eternity. Travis wore a self-satisfied smirk, while Jessica clapped her hands with obvious pleasure. Neither of them registered the stark dismay on my face. My mother busied herself clearing dinnerware, carefully evading my gaze. Eventually, I managed to articulate, my voice strained. "Dad, we specifically discussed that truck for the service calls I manage. Travis doesn't even handle urgent repairs." Dad waved his hand dismissively. "You can continue utilizing your current truck for a bit longer. Travis now needs to project a more polished image, especially since he'll be managing a greater number of client interactions. Besides, you possess the knack for maintaining that old one. You've always excelled at repairs." I observed Travis idly swinging the keys, not even attempting a pretense of gratitude, already musing aloud about potential paint alterations. The truck, rightfully intended for me and crucial for my actual responsibilities, had become his newest plaything. On the journey home, rattling along in my dilapidated, aging vehicle, something within me irrevocably fractured. This wasn't solely about the truck itself. It encompassed 15 years of being disregarded, underestimated, and taken for granted. It involved the painful recognition that, irrespective of my efforts, I would forever remain the dependable workhorse, while Travis would invariably be the preferred offspring. Sleep eluded me that night. I found myself browsing employment advertisements, a prospect I had never genuinely entertained before. I contacted Jack, a former associate who had departed to join a rival company, inquiring casually about their business practices. His immediate reply astounded me. "Alex, given your expertise and client connections, you could dictate your own terms virtually anywhere within the county. Honestly, what has kept you tethered to your father's company for so long?" For the initial time, it struck me that what I had perceived as unwavering faithfulness had, in fact, merely perpetuated my own ill treatment. I had grown so accustomed to being underestimated that I had entirely lost sight of my intrinsic value. Jack disclosed that their firm required a seasoned technician to head their commercial sector, precisely the kind of advancement I had been consistently refused at my father's enterprise. I dedicated the subsequent week to thoroughly cataloging every aspect of my responsibilities. I compiled exhaustive guidelines for all our operational systems, client specificities, upkeep timetables, vendor associations, and emergency procedures. I diligently updated our client roster with comprehensive details on every key customer. My intention wasn't to descend to their standards by undermining the business, but I also resolved not to furnish them with any pretext to contact me post-departure. The following Monday, I arrived at the office ahead of schedule and positioned an envelope on my father's desk. He appeared an hour later, characteristically unpunctual. As he opened the envelope, his demeanor transitioned from bewilderment to outright incredulity. "2 weeks' notice? Is this some sort of jest, Alex?" he queried, reclining in his chair. I articulated my decision with composure and professionalism, touching only briefly on the truck incident. My primary emphasis was on the consistent failure to honor partnership pledges and my imperative for career progression. I had secured a role with Brighton Plumbing Services. "You'll return within a week," Dad scoffed. "They couldn't possibly rival what we provide you here. This is merely a fit of pique over the truck, isn't it?" He made no effort to inquire about my new compensation. Had he done so, he might have grasped that I would be earning nearly 40% more, complete with enhanced benefits and a defined trajectory towards partnership within 2 years. The announcement rapidly disseminated throughout the organization. Travis cornered me in the supply area, his face flushed with genuine alarm rather than his customary self-satisfaction. "You can't simply depart," he hissed. "Who will manage the West Side agreements, or the hospital upkeep, or the urgent call-outs?" For a fleeting moment, his confident pretense crumbled entirely. His voice lowered to a near whisper. "Dad's been preparing me to assume control eventually, but I understand barely half of your responsibilities. I never took the initiative to learn the operational frameworks." I am not prepared for this. His confession of incompetence caught me off guard, but it was no longer my concern. For years, he had been perfectly content to claim recognition while I performed the actual labor. I'm certain you'll manage to work it out, I responded. After all, you have a splendid new truck to cruise around in. Those subsequent 2 weeks proved remarkably liberating. I imparted knowledge to others on as many of my duties as feasible. I presented critical clients to their new service personnel. I meticulously documented every detail in a 3-ring binder, designating it Essential Operations with a prominent marker. On my final day, I left it on my father's desk alongside my company phone, credit card, and building access keys. Dad barely acknowledged my departure, remaining assured I would return, desperate, within days. That evening, Mom telephoned, tearfully urging me to reconsider, stating that family enterprises experience highs and lows, but our unity was paramount. I calmly clarified that I had remained steadfast for 15 years, enduring constant underappreciation. This was no impulsive choice. It was, in fact, 15 years overdue. My initial month at Brighton was truly illuminating. My new manager, Kevin, introduced me to both clients and colleagues as the premier plumber in the entire county. My proposals were not just acknowledged, but actively put into practice. When I outlined a more efficient method for managing commercial maintenance timetables, Kevin tasked me with developing it into a standardized company-wide protocol, providing all necessary means to achieve it. Then arrived my first significant challenge. Brighton had been pursuing the Lakeside Corporate Park Agreement for several months, without success. When Kevin mentioned they were making a final bid, I recognized I possessed vital confidential data. Wilson Family Plumbing had maintained their facilities for years, and I was intimately aware of their past problems and their principal concerns. With this insight, I could practically assure Brighton's victory in securing the contract. However, leveraging such information felt inherently improper, a breach of client trust, even though I hadn't formally signed any non-disclosure agreements. I endured a night without sleep, deliberating my choices. Brighton had offered me everything my previous family venture had withheld: recognition, equitable pay, and genuine prospects. I yearned to demonstrate my capability, but never at the expense of my ethical standards. The following morning, I entered Kevin's office and clarified that while I couldn't divulge specific details about Lakeside's internal systems, I could assist Brighton in formulating a more robust, general proposal, drawing upon my extensive experience with comparable properties. Kevin observed me intently for an extended period. "You know, most individuals would simply exploit any advantage they possessed," he eventually remarked. "Your unwavering integrity is precisely why I brought you on board, Alex. We secured the contract regardless, purely on the merit of our submission, rather than through privileged knowledge." That particular moment solidified my position at Brighton far more effectively than any readily achieved triumph ever could have. Most astonishingly, I concluded my workday at sensible hours. No longer were there urgent calls late at night because Travis had bungled a straightforward task, nor did I spend weekends working because Dad had committed to unrealistic deadlines without my input. I began rekindling friendships, embarked on Saturday hikes, and even commenced dating someone who wasn't perpetually drained by my ceaseless professional demands. Concurrently, the repercussions at Wilson Family Plumbing were rapid and devastating. Within a fortnight, their Yelp rating plummeted from 4.8 to 3.2 stars. Clients who had specifically requested my services were incensed upon discovering my departure. The intricate scheduling system I had devised, which no one else fully comprehended, began to disintegrate, leading to missed appointments and conflicting bookings. By the third week, messages started pouring in, initially from Travis, inquiring, "How do I access the hospital maintenance records?" Then from Dad, asking, "Where did you store the warranty details for the Peterson job?" I replied with concise, professional instructions directing them to the documentation I had prepared, but offered nothing beyond that. A significant catastrophe unfolded when Travis endeavored to conduct the quarterly maintenance at Riverside Medical Center, our most substantial commercial client. He neglected to close a primary valve, resulting in water damage within a storage facility. The hospital promptly rescinded their contract, an annual deficit of $180,000. That identical week, 2 veteran technicians resigned, citing the disorganized scheduling and absence of effective management. I later learned from Tom, one of those technicians who had transitioned to a rival firm, about the subsequent events. Travis had experienced a complete breakdown in the office, violently throwing tools across the workshop and yelling that he was being deliberately sabotaged. He had accused Dad of abandoning him in a difficult situation without adequate instruction, of anticipating him to instantly fill my position when he had never been afforded the opportunity to genuinely learn. Tom recounted how Travis had ultimately slumped onto a workbench, head buried in his hands, mumbling, "Alex made it seem so effortless." I never understood. I never bothered to comprehend. Dad, apparently, had simply stood there, pale and aghast, as the enterprise he had meticulously built disintegrated around him. The illusion of the favored son was crumbling under the harsh reality of genuine accountability. The communications from my family shifted dramatically in their urgency. "We need to talk," evolved into "please call us," then "the business is in serious jeopardy." Mom's calls grew progressively more frantic. Even Travis's fiancée, Jessica, contacted me, expressing his extreme stress and lack of sleep. I consciously maintained my emotional distance, channeling my energy into excelling in my new position. In my initial 2 months, I successfully secured 3 significant commercial agreements, earning a substantial bonus. With my elevated income and sensible work schedule, I finally amassed sufficient savings for a down payment on a modest home. Furthermore, I acquired a new truck of my own, not a company-issued vehicle, but one purchased entirely through the rewards of my equitably compensated efforts. News travels swiftly within our sector. Suppliers who dealt with both companies frequently alluded to the downturn at Wilson Family Plumbing in passing discussions. "Heard your dad had to let go of 3 more individuals," one remarked while delivering components. Ashamed to witness such a long-standing business in such distress. Despite the strong inclination, I preserved my professional integrity, refraining from ever speaking ill of my family. Following 3 months of absolute silence between us, my father telephoned on a Tuesday evening. His voice was altered, sounding aged and despondent. "Alex, we need to converse face-to-face. The business, it's not well." We arranged to meet at a coffee establishment midway between our residences, a neutral location. When Dad and Travis arrived, their physical metamorphosis was startling. Dad had shed considerable weight, his typically pristine presentation now unkempt. Travis appeared as if he hadn't rested in weeks, deep shadows beneath his eyes, his customary bravado entirely absent. They detailed the grim reality. Revenue plummeted by 60%, personnel reduced to only 4 employees, the bank threatening to recall their commercial loan, and 3 trucks already sold to manage expenditures. The new vehicle Travis had so proudly received was also gone, sacrificed to keep the operation afloat. Dad had even mortgaged his own home to inject capital into the struggling venture. "We made errors, Alex," Dad confessed, his voice faltering. "I made grave misjudgments. I undervalued you, and now I am enduring the consequences." For the first occasion in my life, I witnessed my father weep. Travis fixated on the tabletop, unable to meet my gaze. Dad then slid a folder across, revealing a partnership agreement proposing 45% ownership for me, a significant salary adjustment, and full executive oversight. "Please," he murmured, "help us salvage what remains." The former Alex would have seized this opening with eagerness, thrilled to finally attain the acknowledgement I had so deeply yearned for. But that iteration of me ceased to exist the day they gave away my truck. Instead, I calmly articulated that I had no desire to return. I had discovered an environment where my capabilities were appreciated from the outset, not merely after a catastrophic collapse compelled recognition. "I am not attempting to inflict retribution," I clarified. "I simply now comprehend my inherent value. I dedicated 15 years striving to earn something that ought to have been readily bestowed: respect, equitable remuneration, recognition. I will not revert to that." Travis eventually spoke, his voice sounding hollow. "I truly didn't realize how much you handled until you departed. I honestly believed managing service calls was straightforward. I thought—" He paused, swallowing with difficulty. "I thought Dad favored you, entrusting you with all the crucial assignments. I was mistaken. I derived no gratification from their distress. Instead, I provided what assistance I could: names of competent plumbers who might join their reconfigured enterprise, suggestions for streamlining operations to endure with a reduced staff, and counsel on which clients to prioritize for rebuilding their standing. This isn't about vengeance," I assured them. "I didn't leave to cause you harm. I left because I merited more." 6 months on, Wilson Family Plumbing persists, yet it's a mere vestige of its previous prosperity. Dad has significantly receded, contemplating early retirement. Travis has been compelled to genuinely master the craft, personally managing service calls rather than offloading every task. They now operate with only 3 trucks, concentrating primarily on residential work after forfeiting the majority of their commercial clientele. We still encounter each other at family gatherings. Initially, these were uncomfortable, but we're slowly establishing a new normalcy. Mom has at last ceased her attempts to guilt-trip me into returning, particularly since witnessing my new residence and hearing of my promotion to commercial division manager. Even Travis has cultivated a reluctant admiration, occasionally messaging me with technical queries, which I respond to without any bitterness. For the inaugural time in my adult life, I no longer awaken with a sense of dread. I am no longer the excessively devoted son perpetually seeking an affirmation that never arrived. The profoundest weight I ever bore wasn't the arduous physical demands of plumbing. It was the emotional strain of striving to earn affection and regard from individuals who simply took me for granted. Sometimes, leaving isn't about retaliation. Sometimes, it represents the sole route to personal dignity. The most profound vindication I have discovered isn't observing others falter after your departure. It's achieving such thorough success that your absence unequivocally defines your true value. Last month, Kevin intimated his intentions to establish a second branch in the adjacent county, desiring me to oversee its operations. In due course, he suggested I could potentially acquire his share and transform it into my own enterprise. I find myself mentally conceptualizing the insignia, outlining the service territory, envisioning the convoy of vehicles, all painted a distinct hue from Wilson blue, not out of malice, but because I am at last constructing something that is unequivocally my own.